Welcome to the Hernia Gods Podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or opinions of Orlando Health or any of our employers. And now, without further ado, let's talk hernias. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hernia Gods Podcast. I'm your mere mortal host, Luke Elms, and I am joined today by Ramia Stolt. And we sure appreciate you coming on. It is a true honor to get to talk with you. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are and where you come from?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramia Stolt. I work in Sweden, and I work as a consultant surgeon in abdominal wall surgery specifically. I'm also doing my PhD here in Sweden. And I used to make a joke when I tell people I come from Sweden. They're like, "Oh, you're not blonde." And I say, "Yes, I'm not blonde, and I'm a surgeon." So that's quite fun.
So now you, where did you do your training?
I did my training, everything in Sweden. So I'm originally from Afghanistan. And when I moved to Sweden, it was like, that's the only thing I want to do. So it was like straight all the way. So I studied in Gothenburg, did my training and surgical training there as well. And then I have moved a bit across Sweden just to find my place where I think I can evolve and make a contribution to the patients. And I'm very, very passionate about hernia surgery, which is why I have done everything I've done just to reach to some kind of level of involvement.
Yeah. Now, you said you come from Afghanistan originally. At what age did you move to Sweden?
I was almost 13 years old when I moved to Sweden. And the first day I went to school here, and I told them, what do I have to do to get into med school? So, yeah, it was like, that's it, nothing else.
And what did you always just knew you wanted to be a physician, or was that something that kind of like a single experience kind of led to that?
No, but have you seen Dr. Queen, Medical Woman?
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
yep.
That was my dream. So when like normal kids,
great.
when they got their, Barbie dolls or whatever, I got my medical, bag as a child when I was like 3-4 years old. And I loved her. And I said, oh, I want to be like her. Like move somewhere outside and get paid with chickens and eggs and do something. But then I realized you cannot really get paid with chickens or eggs, but still it's kind of the same thing. And I love it. So it's always been that way, that clear path for me. So
that's awesome. It's so funny you mentioned Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. I actually made a reference to that the other day to my residents.
Really?
And nobody knew what I was talking about. And I was like, oh, no, that just means I'm getting older. And then I asked the other people in the room, the older people in the room, and they didn't know what I was talking about either. So I don't know. I guess
I've
it's
missed
just
something. That's pure quality. But today's generation,
exactly.
all the YouTubers or whatever, I'm probably offending people saying that, but I mean, that was all this gold. And Dr. Queen, I mean, she was amazing. And it's really, she's my biggest role model when I grew up. And I have seen that show, I mean, so many times. So back in old times when you have a DVD, I had that as well. So I was like...
That's great, man. That's wild. That's so funny. That just literally happened a few weeks ago with me.
Oh,
and
really?
I looked around. I was like, no way. Nobody remembers that show at all.
I know.
But so what was the cultural jump when you moved from Afghanistan to Sweden? Was that just something that was a big shock to the system?
It was because I remember first of all in Sweden they don't really have homeworks. So I was like, oh my God, I need homeworks and stuff. And then, as a child or as a teenager, whatever you come, I had my focus on one thing. So my friends make fun of me and say like, oh, you never had that teenage period because all you did was studying. But that's because I had to study my grades up. But the cultural thing was a bit, you feel very grateful. And people take things for granted here so easily. And I was like, oh, my God, you come here, you can study for free. And then one thing that is good about Sweden, which I love, is that universities, they're free. So if you have the grades, then you can come and study whatever you want to do, and the government can also pay your mortgage if you want to move for the studies. And I was like, I have come to heaven. I've come to heaven. So I was so happy. And I was like, whenever people say things, and I say, yes, everything I am have reached is thanks to Sweden. They offered me. But, if somebody gives you the opportunity, you have to take it. No one is going to give you like, oh, here is the plate, and you do this, and I'll do this. So in one way, I am very grateful for that experience because, it makes you work hard. And when you reach your goal, you feel the sweetness in that. And that is something you can't really buy with your father's money or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I think it's interesting you say about like feeling the sweetness of accomplishment. I think that for me, that one of the things that I've struggled with throughout my life is I accomplish something and I don't ever really feel it because it's almost like there's always like the next goal, the next goal, the next goal, and so kind of stopping to smell the roses and realize like where you are. That's something that I think is necessary, but I've not always been so good at it. Now, what prompted the move? Because is that kind of pathway? I'm not familiar with that. And so is it the
You
move
mean
from
when we
Afghanistan to
moved?
Sweden?
When we came as refugees, it's the time when Taliban came and took over the country. So it was really, I say it's like life-saving move to come here. And, that's, some people don't really understand it when you say that. When I introduce myself, I say I come from Sweden, and they're like, "Yeah, but you're not Swede, you're not born." And I say, "You know what? I'm more Swede than you are, because that is, all the opportunities that I've got that I would not be able to get otherwise." And that's a fact. I cannot hide that or say something else. And when people say and complain about the country, or where they say whatever they do, then they're just spoiled. They haven't done, I mean, they're just spoiled.
Yeah, it's hard to get that perspective on how good you have it when you've never seen anything else. And I think that's probably definitely something I suffer from. My complaints pale in comparison in life to, the complaints about something like having to leave your home country as a refugee. But I think that's just it's an incredible testament to that kind of dedication that it takes to persevere. And I think that also, I think it's a beautiful thing that you found someplace that was able to really allow you to live out what sounds like a pretty big dream ever since the days of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Yeah, I know. And whenever I get frustrated, because I get frustrated quite a lot, but then I think of after that, and also like, come on, you survived Taliban, you can do anything. So it's like some way to keep myself motivated and not lose the track, because of course, if I would wanted, I could have chosen a very easy path, like not surgery, doing something where you can work private or whatever. But I feel like it's my obligation to pay back, because what they invested in me, the country. So therefore, I need to, do something. And if it's challenging, then it's obviously worth it. So somebody got to do the hard work and the work other people don't want. And for me, surgery, I always wanted to become a surgeon, because that's like Dr. Quinn was a surgeon. And then also that when I was a student, and in Sweden, you do quite a lot of practical work when you are a student. So I tried that, and so just to see if I'm even gifted or not. And I love that experience, and you can actually do something and see it, and sort of diversity in the specialty and everything. So for me, it was like, yeah, that's the thing. And when you work with people and you see like what kind of an impact you have on them, everybody's talking about, oh, cancer surgery, it's so sexy, it's so good. But the thing is that there are such a big amount of people that are not doing cancer surgery, but they have quite a lot of troubles or whatever. And somebody needs to, be a voice for them, like for hernia patients. really coincidence when I got into hernia surgery, because I was doing endocrine surgery. That was my thing. It's beautiful surgery and everything. But then the circumstances changed and everything. And I thought, okay, sure, maybe I can try the hernia surgery, and it fits with my life as a mother and everything. And then I just realized, like, oh, these are so much thing that needs to be done in this such a versatile patient group and category. And yeah, so I kind of felt like, oh, here maybe I can do some kind of contribution in some way.
Yeah, it really sounds, a couple of things that come to mind when you were just talking. It's pretty incredible that you do feel an obligation to give back that's so strong based on your past, but that also, I think that some people approach those types of obligations almost as a negative thing, but it seems like you really approach it from a state of gratitude for what you have, which I think is, it's a refreshing perspective, because I don't think all of us, myself included, have that at their baseline. I'm more of a whiner, I think, but I think that the other thing that you mentioned was kind of how you ended up in hernia surgery, not necessarily by some intentional path, but it sounds like you've really been able to see the good that you can do for that patient population. And I relate to that in the fact that I never set out to be a hernia surgeon. I still do broad base as well. But it isn't until you really start focusing in on hernias that you realize the amount of good that you can do for these patients. And the quality of life aspect can be really rewarding. And I think that that's one of the reasons I got into surgery to begin with, is while I deeply respected my internal medicine colleagues going through training, I really wanted something that I could fix and not just manage. Now, the irony is that, my understanding of hernia surgery has changed over the years, and it is more of a long-term management kind of thing, which I fully embrace. But it's just one of those aspects. Now, so when you were going through, now did you go? What's the model like in Sweden? Do you go straight from high school into a combined program, or do you go to university and then to medical school?
It's very it can differ quite a lot, but the way I got in was that you do your high school, college, and then you apply for university. And at that time, you had to have straight A's, as you call it. But there are other ways as well. You could get in through work experience or other ways, and I did not know of them. So for me, it was like, get just a grade straight so you can come to med school. And so I went straight away. I mean, there was no time to waste, I was thinking. And then shocked when I started in med school, because we were like a very combined group. Lots of people have done other things before applying to med school, and they have started through working experience. At that time, you could come into medical school if you had worked for like 10 years or 5 years experience. And I was like so impressed because, I mean, many of them, they were having families and kids, and they were so structured. So I was like, it kind of opened up my eyes, like, oh, it's not that easy as you think. And I was so impressed that they worked, and then as soon as the school, university was finished, they just got home and to the kids and do that. So it was so hard discipline for them, and I admired that quite a lot. And after that, after you do the med school, at that time it was that you do 5.5 years study, but you can work as a junior doctor after 4 years just to get the experience. And then you do the internship, which is 2 years. And then after that, if you want to start your residency, then you do another 5 years within that specialty that you want to do. And depending on the hospital you want to work and the specialty, surgery is quite popular. So you usually have to work 1 year before you start your surgical training program. And but I mean, you're doing the same work. It's just that you don't get paid properly. And so it was like, let's stick to this. And then after that,
So just for my own clarification, so you get through medical school and then you do a period of time before you go to your internship that you're kind of like in the workforce. Is that
Exactly.
what I'm understanding?
Yeah. That's what it used to be. Now they have changes according to the European thing, but I mean, here comes my opinion as well, and I know many people share them as well, is that I think that the quality of medical students or doctors that graduate will be not as good as it has been so far, because when you do your internship, you do like 6 months in surgery, 6 months in internal medicine, and 6 months as GP out, as and then 6 months as psychiatry, and that gives you the ability to understand what different specialties do and what to expect from them. Because now after the European deal that people that don't have the grades in Sweden, they go to like I don't know, like Romania or other countries, Poland and stuff, and then they get to med school there, and then once they finish, they don't have to do any interns, because according to the European rules, you don't have to. And it's difficult for them when they come, because they get completely shocked that they're not experienced at all to have any clinical experience as students have in Sweden, because it's from semester one, you're out there in clinic. So I think it has advantages and disadvantages, but mostly it is, I mean, you got to do the hard work. Otherwise, you cannot, it will be difficult for you once you have your medical license and you have not even treated the patient with a cardiac infarction or whatever that comes. So it depends on what you like and what kind of person you are. But for me, I think it was really good to see that, and also to get an experience in those different specialties, because then you know what you want to do and you know what is expected from others. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that in the U.S. system, we go on rotations, and some of our rotations, at least in my medical school, were 6 weeks or a month, or even some of our smaller rotations were 2 weeks, and you're trying to kind of make like a decision on what you want to be for the rest of your career based on like a 2-week experience.
Exactly.
And I think it lends itself to, at times people get pretty far down a training pathway before they go, I may not have chosen this if I'd have known. And that's kind of an interesting, possibility to have had a broader based experience prior to really having to go into and make those decisions. One thing that you did mention, though, is you talked about the fact that a lot of your colleagues through medical school had more experience in the real world, or life experience prior to getting into medical school. I did college in 3 years and jumped straight into medical school. So I was in medical school shortly after turning, shortly after turning 21. Mm-hmm. And so, and again, similar to you, I think that there was such a difference between my level of maturity and my view of the whole experience of medical school versus my classmates who may have been out in the workforce or had families or had young kids at home and things. They always seemed, again, like you said, it was always baffling to me how they balanced things so well and still performed at such a high level. But I also think there was a benefit in the level of maturity and the understanding that there was kind of life outside of training, because I didn't have that. And there was many times that I felt like this crushing weight of expectation, because that was like my whole life was wrapped up in my training. Mm-hmm. Did you feel that was kind of something that you saw in your classmates, or how I guess my question in general is that kind of the approach that the European society takes to those types of things, or is that just more of an American kind of experience?
But I agree with you. And usually in Scandinavian countries, I mean, it is very more open-minded, and it is important that you have some kind of a life outside your work. And compared to other European countries, maybe we are a bit more more liberated in that, because it teaches you, it normalizes in the society, but that you should not just be a workaholic. There is work, and then there is other things. Like, for example, as I mentioned, if you have kids and family, I mean, the system in Sweden is built that parents work and you take care of your own kids. We don't have the nanny system as it is in other countries. And not because it's expensive, but it's also because the society tells you, like, it kind of normalized that there is other things in life, and family, if you don't take care of it, no one else will do it for you. You are very independent in the society. It's not like you live with your parents and then take care of your children or someone else. And that kind of puts you pressure, like, okay, if we want to have this kind of system, then we need to have working balance for that. Otherwise, we cannot deal with this. I mean, if everybody needs to do full time, then, for example, a school system must provide childcare, and also when they are in kindergarten and everything in that part. And I know many friends say that, oh, it's so socialistic and everything, but I like it because, I mean, you get kids because you want to take care of them. It's not an accessorize. And I just get, I don't know, no offense to people who don't prioritize that, but I mean, like, if you don't have time to for kids or your family, then why do you get them? And then you complain or whatever. Because, I mean, whatever that is in life, you need to have a balance, and you need to have time for that. And in order to do that, you cannot expect other people doing that for you. You need to do something so that society goes along with that. I mean, everybody wants to work full time, but we need to take care of our children. We need to take care of the other stuff. And that puts everything into another perspective that perhaps many people don't think about it. I mean, surgery has been very dominated by male, for example, even in Sweden. But now, for the last decades, it has changed. You see more female, and also female trainees are a majority choosing surgery. And you see a shift. I mean, from the time I did my training till now, it's quite a lot of change in the society and the way we see it. Like, everybody gets family, so a working place cannot just expect you to, work and then have a housewife, because it doesn't work in the society here. And so it kind of changed the perspective from what it was seen before, like it's a duty and it's like such a great thing. But in reality, everybody, has bills to pay, and everybody has to go home and take care of whatever they have. So it's very positive, and I like it. But as I mentioned, you have to be prepared and do the changes and take these kind of discussions and everything in your everyday life in order to change that, not for yourself, but for the next generation that comes.
Right. Yeah, no, I think we've, the United States is definitely not to that point yet as far as the work-life balance. My wife is a physician. She has had to make job changes throughout her career to help accommodate us as a family. That's, something that I haven't had to do. That's something that she has done. To make that work. We do have a nanny because of the way it's still a very challenging thing for both of us to be working full time. And the pressure of that kind of splitting of your roles, or being expected to be 100% present at all times in every aspect of your life, is something that she experiences at a level that I don't. Just being a male and being in the way that our relationship is kind of just set up, but also from a social standpoint, I think she feels the weight of being expected to be like the 100% mom. She'll be at night, at home and really, for instance, she makes our kids lunch every day. There's the ability to eat at school, but she very much values, and one of the ways she shows love is by making their lunch. And it's not enough to make the sandwich. She has to make it and cut it into the shape of a star or the shape of a heart or something. And I respect that immensely. But, that's something that matters to her, and she feels like this obligation, but then also feels a very strong obligation to be 100% there for her patients and 100% devoted to that as well. And I think that what you end up getting is getting pulled in so many directions that at times it's kind of overwhelming. And it is not something that is necessarily felt by as many of our male colleagues, myself included, because the expectation more from I think a social standpoint for me is to go to work and make some money to come home and support things. And so me working long hours and coming home late at night and not, making the lunches is not necessarily something that's that outside the ordinary, and we try to split that burden equally whenever we can. But I do think that being a female physician lends itself to issues that male counterparts probably don't have to deal with. How do you feel like that has played a role in your decision making career wise, and then just in your whole outlook on your approach to your career?
I mean, that's something, of course, that have heard so many times. I mean, before even going to surgery, my mom told me, like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Then you cannot have a life and everything." But then my answer was that, but if I get kids, they will have a father as well. And, the father needs to provide as much as I do at home, because it's not just, I think the society wants to, or claims that it's a woman's job. And as everybody sees that it's like this unpaid job that women have, this amount of responsibility for not only do your job outside home, but also to be a consistent mom and do everything and do the bakery and everything. And I think it's just a very, for me, it's not the right way to look at the society, because I think why does people expect women to do that, but not the male? So I question that. Like, okay, but how can we do that so they can also be supportive and do that? So this is another thing that kind of made me even more motivated. Like, but you know what? Why go through the same pathway that everybody has done it, and just do like, oh, only male got to become surgeon, and the women, they need to end up either as GP or working less or whatever. So I kind of challenged that, and I said, but you know what? Why should not I get to do what I want to do? Why do I have to do sacrifice, So, I mean, even in here, this is like one of the most equal countries in the world. Still, I mean, after I went back from maternity leave quite early in the Swedish aspect, and everybody was telling me, "Oh, how could you leave your child at home? And it's too early." And I mean, it was like after 6 months, and I said, "But they have a father as well, and this is important for their connection as well, because if I don't want to bring kids to the world where I feel like the only way they are connected to a parent is to me, and this is a mutual responsibility." And that's why I say, like, if you don't have time, then don't get them, because somebody needs to take that work. And I believe that you can try to the society needs to make those changes so that people can actually do that. If you want to have normal people in the society in the future, the next generation, so we don't get those either spoiled brats or sociopaths with no empathy or whatever. I think it's kind of important for them to see that. And I mean, I try to show my kids, okay, I work quite a lot, yes I do, but I also want to show them that the norm is not what everyone expects it to be. The norm for every family is different. I mean, for one family, it might look this way, and for the other one, that way. And it's important for them, not make them go like, the blind leads the blind, everybody doing whatever they have been done. I mean, a part of this is to question everything you're doing. And if you want to change it, then you need to question that, and you need to do something yourself, because no one's going to do that. But of course, I mean, that's why our social system here is better, because without that, we would not be able doing these kind of things. And I sometimes joke with people, because they say, "Oh, you guys work in Sweden, so you don't work anything." And then I say, but you know what? We work very efficiently. I mean, we came up with the IKEA. So make your life easier and be efficient on things you do. And always try for the quality. But, it's important to have the other part as well. I mean, when I did my internship, I had a mentor, and he's no longer with us, but he said something to me that really changed my way of thinking. I was like straight A's in everything, and I want to be a surgeon, everything. And then he told me, "Ramia, there are 3 things in life that you need to think about, and it's like 3 rocks. One is family, the other one is friends, and the third one is work. And if you stand on 3 rocks, if you lose one of them, you still have two to stand on. But if you only live for work and don't prioritize the other things, and you lose your job, then you have nothing to stand on. And it sounds so cliche, but it was like the best advice I ever got in my life. And that made me really question, like, okay, it's actually true, because no one's going to thank me because I work like a slave or whatever I do for free. No one's going to thank you anyway. And I don't want to be a part of this echo wheel that you do the same thing and it's destructive for everyone. I mean, I believe that you can actually have a balance, and you have to work for it, of course. It doesn't come easy, but you still have the responsibility of your own life. And I don't want people to think that, oh, I'm a victim just because I'm a woman. I mean, I had struggles. I had so much shit going through. I mean, I've had it, everything. And I have been hit on, I mean, literally, like you are scrubbed in, and then you get hit in your fingers because, some people cannot deal with their own ego. And that keeps me like, but you know what? I don't want things like this. I want it to be changed. And if I don't stand up for this, then the shit will continue like that. Somebody needs to break this generational trauma, we can talk about other things. And I think that, I have two children, and one of them is a girl. And my biggest fear is that I don't want her to go through the same struggles I did. Perhaps I had an advantage because I came from this background that made me like, you're so eager. You don't get anything for free, so you have to work for it. But they have been grown up in this country with everything. They would never, ever even experience half of what I've done. And I don't see any reason for why she needs to go through the same thing as I did. Because, so that's another thing that puts pressure on me, like, okay, but if I don't stand up for other females, or then we're going to be in the same way again. And that's another thing that I have to think of, that, whatever I'm doing, perhaps it will lead to something better for the next person that comes. And you don't have to become bitter because other people has been that. I mean, sorry for interrupting you, but I mean, like some of the meanest people I have met during my surgical career has been female surgeons that been through a lot of shit. I mean, you can understand why they are so miserable. And then I look at it and I say, but okay, I get the same thing, but I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be so miserable. I want to be happy. But I still, so I believe it's another way to make your own, being a bit of Mahatma Gandhi, passive aggressive, and make your resistance by not becoming like that, and choose to. So there are many.
Yeah. Well, I think that, one of the things, first of all, I'm a white male from Oklahoma. So as far as like the struggles of that, I definitely have not experienced those personally, and so I don't claim to understand what it is to be experiencing those. I've seen the experiences that my wife and that friends who are surgeons, who are female, or even the trainees that come through our program. I see the difference in the way that we're perceived. If I'd walked into a room as a trainee and said the exact same word for word, same tone, same situation as some of my female colleagues or some of my female trainees, many times I would have been labeled as a leader or assertive. And that's, not the word that is assigned to my female counterparts. And they're labeled as disruptive or difficult or mean or any other more colorful words that are assigned frequently. But I think and that's something that is, at least here, it's a tough thing because I agree 100%. We have to have the discussions. We have to have the acknowledgement that there is an issue, and hopefully that through those acknowledgments and through those discussions and through challenging the norms and being unapologetically driven like you are, and demanding that this be a shared experience of the family raising and things like that. That is very reasonable. All those things that it's necessary. But then there's also the flip side, at least here, where I feel like it's kind of tough, because in some of those cases, if they don't understand the differences in the way that they're perceived versus some of their male counterparts, many times it can be disruptive to career paths. And it, we see people getting, complaints filed by other members of the team, of the healthcare team, or what have you, on people that never would have had a complaint filed necessarily if that had been a different situation with a different person. And so it's a weird balancing act to try to, from a standpoint where I've never really had to experience that personally, to be able to kind of understand that, other than to try and come to the defense and point that out when it happens. But again, it's a really tough thing. Over here, we've had situations where there's like this pressure to produce early in your career. There's this pressure, despite there being many rules against asking about it or using it as a way of like choosing, residents or employers or things about the potential to have a family in the future. But there's kind of I'm certain that some of my colleagues still feel pressure. My wife and I had numerous conversations about the fact that, well, we'll wait until the time is right. We're going to wait to have kids till the time is right. My wife wanted children from before we were married. Finally we're just like, well, I guess there's never a right time. But being present frequently for our kids was something that mattered to us. And it's something that she took a lot of sacrifices or changes in her career path that I don't think she really actually viewed them as a sacrifice, because I think that it mattered so much to her to be present that it was just part of it. And I came to that a little bit later in my path, where I was working realistically over 100 hours a week for a few years there in the early part of my career. That was one of the things that really made me change my path, was coming home when my son was like 1.5, and my wife being like, there's a distinct difference in his mood and the way he interacts and things whenever you're present more versus less. And it was really something that shone a light in my eyes. It was not that I didn't care about him at all. In fact, I thought that somehow it was this noble endeavor that I was working so hard and really pushing myself to my like physical and mental limits to try and produce, to try and to create the life that I wanted for them, with my son coming first and my daughter, 2.5 years later. But that really kind of shone a light on. And then listening to some of the surgeons that were more senior, and listening to some of them talk, and at times even be boisterous about the aspects of how hard they worked early in their careers and how little they knew their kids and things. And almost it was kind of like this level, at least sometimes we have this level of almost like martyrdom, that you kind of like sacrifice yourself for the career to the point that you miss out on things that would have otherwise been very meaningful for you. But it's all done in the name of like taking care of your patients. And I got to admit, it's something that I don't think that's necessary. In fact, I think that being a well-rounded person and having a strong connection, and having 2 stones, or ideally even 3 stones to stand on, as opposed to 1, probably makes us not only better individuals, but better people for our patients. And so that aspect is something that's so difficult. But have you experienced a level of perception difference between you and your male counterparts in your system? Or is that something that you feel like your society, as it is currently, is maybe a little bit different than maybe what we experience here?
I think we had the same thing as well. And that's why, instead of whining, because I realized it doesn't help if you whine and say like, oh, why does my male colleagues do this and that? Because I say that I have like the lethal triad. I'm a young woman, I'm immigrant, and I'm not that big. I'm like not the Scandinavian male. So I have like 3 obstacles to overcome. So I need to, achieve like 2 or 3 times better. And at the beginning, I was like that. I was really like overachieving in everything. And then when you see that, okay, we normalize a system that you have to overachieve because everybody thinks, as you said, what will you do for the patients and everything. And that is the pathological way, because we normalize a dysfunctional system. So in my when I did my trainee, for example, we had this, how you say, like people choosing trainees depending on who they get along with and everything. And I think it's wrong, not because, I mean, this is a governmental funded hospitals. You go there for work. You don't go there to get, friends to go fishing with. You can do that, but I mean, it's not the whole point. So of course, I mean, you feel frustrated when you feel like, oh my God, this guy who is a like half mediocre surgeon. Sorry for the expression, but he was. And then, you have to do everything, and then you don't even get the same respect or anything. So then instead of whining, I just look at the numbers, because numbers is very good. Whatever you do, you just show numbers. So I took out the statistical and for like basic procedures we did as trainees. And then I kind of like, okay, let's, compare them. Who has better outcomes for basic procedures like appendectomy or hernia surgery? Because that's what you do when as a trainee. And then we saw that, our male trainees, they really have bad numbers. And that was like, it was like cursing in the church when we took that out. And I got lots of shit for that. But then I was like, but this is the numbers, because this is the way we do it. And perhaps that has something to do that we either let the male doctors, you let them free too early, because maybe it's that, or maybe it's because, as female, you have to observe, because every day you're like new with the new surgeon and they don't trust you with anything. So you really have to earn that. And of course, I mean, if I would have gotten the same opportunity as my male colleagues, of course I would be much better. But that kind of helped me, like, okay, instead of standing in 10 surgeries, I only got one chance, and I really need to learn that in that way. I mean, what options do I have? And that kind of makes me more resilient to maybe challenges that maybe my male colleagues cannot do. And this kind of, instead of whining, you just show the number. These are the outcomes and these are the numbers. So what are we going to do? And then you have to do something about it. And I think also for the patients, I mean, the more experience you get, the more relaxed you get. And I don't think patients, at least not in here, they're not like, oh, I want to go to the professor or whatever. They want to go to someone that listens. And if you treat people with respect, and if you being a bit, try to do your best and not to harm people, and if you have this kind of attitude rather than, fostering robots that, work their ass off with no empathy or whatever, and with egos like, to sky, that's not good for the society in the long term. So what we need is some kind of human aspect. And that is not something that everybody got, but I think it comes with the level of dedication that you have. If you have lots of struggle and you still keep going, then you get a bit further than somebody that got everything served on a plate. And whenever they face a challenge, they cannot really deal with that. But to focus on that, to change that, is that we need to be aware of that. Okay, do I want to stay in this kind of dysfunctional system, or can we do something to change it? And by making things, increasing the awareness about how it works and how the outcomes and how we, have this bias when we deal with trainees. First step is to recognize that you have a problem, and then you start working to solve it. And of course, lots of things has changed. Nowadays, the other day I had a trainee with me that was going to do a lab collie, and she was like, "Oh, I want to do it." She really took for her, as you say it. And I was like, time is changing now. It's good that she's so confident. She want to do this, and it really gave me the satisfaction that I feel like, something is happening, and it is happening, whether you want it or not. And it really made me happy to see that, it's not usually the male trainee that want to take everything, but also the women trying to do that. But of course, you need to have a transparent system. If everybody gets a very neutral training that does not depend on your social contacts or who you're buddy with or who you're married with or who whatever you do it should be very transparent, like system, a pathway. Everybody goes through the pathway. That way we take away that pressure that you have to be buddy with people, because some people are good at doing the ass kissing, but some of us are not doing it, because I think, why should I do that? I mean, I want my work to speak for itself. And when you are at work, you're doing your work. You're not there to, encourage people's ego. And I know it sounds very, very provocative, but that's how you change attitudes. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in the same world with the dinosaurs, with the same dysfunctional attitudes that you only work and you work till you lose your family, you get divorced or whatever. And I'm not prepared to pay that price. So why should I do that?
Do you have any, changes that you think are necessary from a very specific standpoint? Besides, I mean, obviously you've talked about really trying to focus in on the data of the trainee, the data in unbiased to personal affinity for a personality type or anything like that. I mean, I think there's definitely aspects of likability that can affect our ability to assess trainees, in a very real human sense. But do you have any specific changes that you think might be beneficial, that would be something we could work towards?
I think we need to stop focusing on being this super person. I think it's important to show that we are all humans. Everybody deals with their problems. And it's important to talk about that as well. Just because you're a doctor, it doesn't mean you are Iron Man or Iron Woman. You still have your struggles and everything. And we need to be more open about that. And that's what makes the team more like human-like, that people actually accept that, oh, okay, you perhaps you had a bad day and we tried to solve it. Because let me take another example. Like there was a scrub nurses, and there was this male surgeon that, behaved like shit. And, when you are as a trainee and then you see this guy or this male doctor in a higher position than me and being so obnoxious to the staff members. And I mean, in this kind of situation, if you are, as they say, street smart, you don't get your nose into this, because then you get in trouble. But I cannot stand with this kind of things. And call me whatever you want to call it, but this is who I am. And I don't like this bullying or that kind of a mentality. So I just said to this person, like, do you know it's the 2020 year and it is illegal what you're doing, and that's called harassment. And I was like, basically, like, get out of my room. And I said, I'm sorry, but this is not your room. This is a government public hospital. And the thing is, I mean, I have got so much shit, but the thing is, after that nurse came and she thanked me and said, thank you, because, they deal with so much shit. And this is the step. It's like, whether you're in a coffee room or whatever it is, you have to stand up for something. You cannot just see, like, monkey see, monkey do, and you normalize what people's bad behavior. And so I have many of those kind of examples, but I think I would do them again. I mean, you know what? I have to kind of be able to look at myself in the mirror the day after. And if I don't stand for what I believe, which is like basic human rights, if I don't do that, then I cannot look at myself in the mirror. And I don't know, call it stupid, call it whatever you want, but this is me. And I think we need to be a little more, kind to each other and kind of foster each other. But like you do with the kids, you say, that was not it. You don't do that again. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, sacrifice. I've got so many doors closed because of that, because I've been so
Yeah.
outspoken. But I believe that somehow when you stand up for people that cannot stand up for themselves, this is why I chose medicine. This is why I want to become a doctor, to do something. And if it wouldn't be medicine, then it would be maybe a law or something else. But still, I think so. It's everybody can do anything, something. So it doesn't have to be any revolution from higher levels or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're talking about, you obviously have a ton of very admirable convictions, and that's not a bad thing at all. The truth, just like you just said, I think the truth is that at times standing up for those convictions may have, not negative impact is not necessarily the right term, because I think the positivity of standing up for your convictions you would probably argue, I guess, I would assume that positivity outweighs the negative consequences of what you described as like the doors being closed to you. Did you feel those convictions, and were you that outspoken even as a trainee, or was that something that you developed over the course of time?
When I was student, when you're a student, you don't even have any rights whatsoever. You're like invisible ghost. And there are like two situations that I still remember that kind of still makes me frustrated. One is that I think it was during OB-GYN course. And then, at least in Sweden, when you have so many students, you need to ask the patient for permission if you want exam or B. Out of respect, you have to do it. And we normally did it, but then there was it was a female woman, immigrant female, that was the patient. And it was like me and three guys, the students, that's was supposed to be in the examination. And you could see that the patient was very uncomfortable. And when she saw that there were three male students and then me, and the doctor, it was a male obstetrician. And when it was standard procedures, standard outpatient clinics, it was nothing there. But she was uncomfortable. And she tried to ask like, I don't feel like I want to be examined by them. And then this supervisor of us, he said, no, but this is university hospital. It's a teaching hospital. You have to do that. And of course you can say it in a whatever way that was, but I saw that, okay, the patient is not comfortable. This is not the way he would have spoken to a native Swedish person. And I could not keep my mouth shut. And I said, but I'm sorry, but the patient has right to say no to examination according to the laws that we have. And I don't think it's ethical that we all examine her against her will. And I got in quite a lot of trouble because it was like mentioned to the principal of the university and everything. And I said, but this is wrong. And I got the warning for that. But still, I was like, I would do that again, because it's moments like this that you want to see. Like, I don't want to repeat this kind of thing, because I could have been that patient. And that is something, my male colleagues, they don't really reflect about that. But, it is very exposing to be in that situation in the first place. And then getting examined by some student just because you're in a teaching hospital, that's bullshit. And, you need to stand up for these kind of values. And these things, you're not necessarily being taught. In school, there's no grade you can get on that. But it's like, for me, it's a common sense, but you need to actually value those kind of things and also think of that and not taking that for granted that, we're here for the patient. We're not here to just, find surgical procedures or whatever. Otherwise, you are in the wrong place. And I think that kind of keeps me, get back in the track whenever I feel a bit lost, and I say, okay, I don't want to become a materialistic person that only thinks money, because no, this is not what I want to do. these, I want to still have connection to the roots, to the patient. This is why I love the job, and this is whatever I'm doing, and I hope that even if I don't get anything for that myself, I get just lots of shit because of that, because I put my nose in stuff that I don't do. But if I don't do it, then who's going to do it? And this could, I can be that patient, or my mother could be that patient, and I want to do that. So I believe that everybody has the responsibility to act. And if you cannot do it, and if you're being silent, then you agree on something. And this is where we need to change these norms, those dysfunctional norms.
Yeah, no, I think obviously I would say that there's a large portion of people, myself included probably, that have convictions but probably don't have the guts to do when the rubber meets the road, like you have given examples of doing what's right at the moment. And so, I commend your bravery, because that's what it is. And that's,
but I mean, of course, if I would have been in another
sacrifice.
country, maybe I wouldn't even get. I mean, they probably wouldn't even let me go through it. But of course, it was advantage that it was in Sweden. I mean, it is supposed to be one of the most equal countries, and it is just because it is. It doesn't mean that we need to stop. We still have our challenges, and we still need to work with that. But it's an ongoing process. You can never stop, and there is always something you can improve.
Yeah. Well, I think that I think that there are there's definitely differences in where you practice and where we practice. And some of those are good, some of those are bad. Nothing's hardly anything in the world is 100% one way or the other. But one thing that I think is an interesting kind of debate is what to do in some of the situations where you in some of these cases you pick battles, and you wonder if you pick every battle, are you going to be able to get to a level where you can affect a change at a level that can change more than just one individual battle at a time. And that's more of just I've had that discussion with my colleague, with my partner at work. We talk about these types of things. I've had that discussion with my wife of there's so many different things that I feel strongly about in my job. Many of them are not necessarily as eloquently stated as what you have stated, but I think that you kind of have to end up choosing which battles to fight, because you want it to be as impactful as possible. But it's definitely one of those situations where I think many people have good intentions, very good intentions. I think that many times, for instance, here's a recent example from me. So that of having good intentions, but just being naive to reality that was once pointed out, it's oh man. So having conversations like this, I think, are very beneficial, because many times it brings it to a level of consciousness where it's not somebody who's inherently trying to be biased or has an inherent feeling that something's one way or another, but just kind of brings to the front man, maybe I'm contributing to that and just unwittingly contributing to this, to this situation. But recently we host a physician book club. And one of the reasons, ironically, that we host this physician book club is because my wife and I had a mentor in medical school who felt that it was very impossible. The description of that led him to this conclusion was that he was a primary care physician. He was an internal medicine doc, actually, and he was a white male from rural Oklahoma. He was actually from my hometown, and he had a patient who was this elderly African American male here in Oklahoma City, and he was trying to counsel her effectively for her health care, and he realized that he didn't understand where she came from. It was not, he had immense respect for it. It was not a disrespectful thing, but he just couldn't know what it was to be her, because he had never had that experience. And no matter how much he tried, it would never. Yeah. And so his thought was, we have the ability to use the arts, and specifically literature, to at least try to get a window into the world of another human being that would allow you to maybe not fully be able to comprehend, but at least empathize or acknowledge what you don't understand, and spur on conversation that might allow you to become more become a better physician, become a better human. And so he felt strongly about medicine and literature. So we took his course. Well, we host a book club because my wife and I feel strongly about that as well. And so we were in this book club, but we were talking about a specific conversation about the interactions in clinic. And I am a minority in the surgical community, but I actually enjoy clinic. I like the relationships that I create there. And so whenever I walk into a room, there are aspects of what I how I introduce myself in that very first 30 seconds of the interaction that I feel are incredibly important to develop a rapport, to put the other person at ease, to allow them to feel empowered to speak up, to kind of guide their own aspect, but also kind of break through that ice that if you do a poor job of it early, a clinic visit might take 30 or 40 minutes to get to the same point. That if you don't have that barrier there at the beginning, if you've been able to broach and make that connection early, that realistically the same outcome or even better can be accomplished in a shorter amount of time. Because whether it's right or not, being efficient in the U.S. healthcare system is necessary, or you drown. And so I was talking about the fact that I walk in, I rarely introduce myself as doctor or physician or anything like that. I usually just introduce myself as Luke Elms. And the reason I do that is because I don't want there to be like this perceived hierarchy. I've had feedback in the past. I'm 6'3". I'm a fairly big guy by most standards. And so, I've unintentionally intimidated people. Not that my intention was to do that, but just by my physical, like standing up beside a bed, sometimes I could see people be a little bit uncomfortable. So I've found that, I try to sit and make sure I'm like on eye level with folks, not to have this weird perceived imbalance in power, because I think that allows people to have a better deal. And one of the feedback from that conversation, when I was talking about the things that I do to try and help develop a better connection with my patients, one of the female members, she's a pediatrician here in town, a good friend, she raised her hand. She said, well, that's because you're a white male that you're able to do that. If I did that, they would think I was the nurse.
Yeah.
Fair. I'm not, that's the 100%. No, she's not wrong. I had never considered that. It was not something that when she pointed it out, I was like, that's right. Not that I was like sitting there trying to intentionally take advantage of my situation, but it was something that I just hadn't even thought of. And I think that there's a lot of those aspects where these conversations can hopefully be enlightening to people and really bring out some of those differences in experience that it is to be a physician, not just a patient, not just anything, but just the differences that it is to be a physician. Because, the things that I've said or done through my career have been perceived one way. Whereas if I was a different person, it would have been perceived differently. Sometimes maybe better, a lot of times probably worse, just because of who I am. And so I applaud you for all the work that you do and all the awareness you try to bring to this, because I do think that it's a necessary conversation to have.
And it's very interesting. I mean, her comment that, if she would go in there it happens to everyone, but if you switch the question, like, okay, and what is wrong with that? Because, in Sweden, we don't have any hierarchy. We don't, I'm so uncomfortable whenever you go to conferences or where you speak and they introduce you like, oh, Dr. Stolt. And I feel so uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, I have a name. I'm just, like anybody else in the room. And we try to have this atmosphere like when you do outpatient clinic or whatever. We work there as a team. And the nurses, they contribute so much. And I don't want to brag, but they love me. And that's because, you work with people. It's like in any other job, you have to have basic skill in respect. And if you have a good respect, then you get much better outcomes. You work out so smoothly. And these kind of things, if I go to the patient, of course, at the beginning, they still ask me, even now, like, oh, you look so young. Are you the doctor or stuff? And I say, yeah, but it's 2025. Women can get surgeons. It's okay. I just use it. But yeah. I believe that it's actually an advantage when you do that, because when I see the patient, they have no guards, no nothing, because I'm not intimidating to them at all. And then as long as you speak, and I think I was actually reflecting about that I explain quite a lot to them. And that is my coping mechanism to show them that, I know what I'm talking about. But it makes them feel safe. And they appreciate it that you explain things for them. For me, it takes like 2 minutes extra. But the whole consultation, it gives so much more, because then you, as you mentioned, you get this relationship, and then they tell you things that you really want to know, and it doesn't have to take that long. But of course, they notice the dynamic in the whole clinic when you see that. I mean, if you are in a working place where there is strict hierarchy, and whether with clothing or the way you introduce yourself or all this kind of thing, when you have a conversation with other people, like your table is higher where the patient sits. I mean, that's very basic psychology. And if you're aware of that, then you try to make it a bit more relaxed. I think that's much easier both for me as a doctor and for the patient. It saves their time as well, because I can tell you that sometimes you have colleagues that they do the word, and the patient don't understand anything. And they feel like, oh, I've already done the work. And then they go and grab the nurse and like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand anything because I was so nervous. And this is, I think that's actually an advantage of being a woman, because they don't have their guard like that. So it actually makes our lives so much easier. So once again, we're not the victims, but, I think these kind of things we can actually use it and learn from each other. That I think it's actually an advantage to be that. So not so intimidating.
Yeah. Well, I think there's benefits to having had experiences yourself when it comes to your patients. 2 examples. One, my wife, who's an OBGYN, after she gave birth to our son, which was her first child, and our first, I should say our first child. It's not like I had a bunch before. So, but anyway, our first child. She talked about the difference in the way she counseled women, because she'd been through it, right? The way that my practice and the way I counseled patients changed after my mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and understanding that fear. Even more recently, my wife had a BI-RADS 4 breast mass and had to undergo a biopsy. We had, by all intents and purposes, the most charmed, privileged scenario, where she got the mammogram and ultrasound, and she got the biopsy like the next day, and we had the results back in like 2 days, right? Nobody gets that. That's a level of efficiency that's not afforded 99.99% of the world. And so we experienced it at such a minuscule level, yet the amount of stress that those 3 days put on our family was immense, and it changed the way that I deal with things. And so I thought, man, I'm never going to let a patient sit over the weekend wondering about their biopsy results. If I have the results come back and they get loaded up on a Friday night, I'm going to call them. And so, but then kind of an ironic aspect of this whole thing was the fact that the first time that I was like, I'm going to do the right thing, I pick up the phone on like Saturday at like 7 p.m. The biopsy results came back. There must have been a pathologist that was just working on a weekend. But so the results come back through the system, and I see him, and I pick up the phone. I'm like, oh, great, they're negative. It was a good result. And I call this lady on the phone. She's like a young mother and had this concerning mass, and it turned out to be benign, which was great. I called her on the phone, and she answers the phone, in tears. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is Dr. Elms. I'm calling. Just wanted to let you know that your breast mass is benign. And she was like, oh my God. She was so relieved, because she assumed that getting a call from your doctor on the weekend, at least in here, was bad news. And I was like, even my best of intentions failed. But so now I counsel them. I'm like, I'm going to call you. It may be at a weird hour or on a weekend. That doesn't mean it's bad news, And so, it's personal experience lends itself to a very different way that we approach our careers and our lives. And I would love to hear. I suspect that your immigration from Afghanistan to Sweden, your experiences early in life and seeing the Taliban and you having to leave the country to pursue what you've been able to become and what you've been able to do now. Do you feel that has lent you more towards this feeling that of the justice that's necessary and the inadequacies in the way people are treated and pointing that out more openly?
I think it is, and also the fact that I feel I'm so sad for the situation in Afghanistan right now. When you see it with girls, this is another big passion of mine, women's rights, and that's why I try to say, okay, I have a voice, and I need to use it, whether I want it or not, and whether people like it or not. I have to use it because there are so many people that would do anything to be in this position. So I cannot be despoiled and think of like, oh, I will ruin this and this and this, and I will not get this. You know what? I don't care. And I believe that, as long as you're trying to be your own authentic you, the worst thing I know is like, monkey see, monkey do. Everybody copies each other and everybody saying exactly the politically correct answers and everything just to do the ass kissing. I don't like that. You have to be real you, and you have to stand up for something. It doesn't matter what it is. But of course, my background has had a big impact on this. And why do I love the job? Is because of course, the patients. Because I love people. That's my thing. But I think that what has been most challenging to deal with, and with the cultural differences, it's been, I think, the attitudes from your own colleagues. And I call them either mentors or dinosaurs. So if you're a mentor, then you're a good person. And if you're a dinosaur, then it means you're like T-Rex, like you just want to eat people. And it kind of gives you perspective, like, okay, yeah, whatever they throw at you, like if they throw at you lemons, go and do a lemonade. And if whatever they try to challenge me, it's been so many times I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to quit surgery. I cannot deal with this. I cannot stand with this kind of thing. But then you try to turn it into something like, okay, how can I use this? Because I hate being a victim. I'm not a victim. I have a choice. Everybody has a choice. You either give up or you accept it or you just do something about it. And just to mention, like when I started with hernia surgery and I was in that hospital that did not believe in minimally invasive procedures. And when I started doing TEP and stuff, I was like, the black sheep in the clinic, because they were like, oh, why this is not good or whatever. We've done this so many times and we have good results and whatsoever. And I'm like, but after you've seen the patient, for example, when you do open surgery and you do minimal invasive, you see the difference and then you realize, oh shit, actually, this is actually helping. And you start believing in that. And then you study more and everything. So I said, okay, if you don't believe me, then let me start to do a research about it. And this is what my PhD is about, like the quality of the hernia surgery we do in Sweden. So it kind of, I use that as a motivation. So I'm like, okay, if you don't believe me, then I'm going to come back here in a couple of years with my PhD. And then you see that I was right and you were wrong. And that is so provocative, me, I'm not that big. And saying that in the room with like all the dinosaurs, certain age, and you question these kind of things. And of course, I accept that, okay, this battle, it just comes, whatever. But then I know that this opens the door for others after me, that to question, to start thinking for yourself, are we actually doing good? Because my biggest fear is that you stop thinking. You just because you do something and then you think, oh, I'm doing good, and you never question what you're doing. That would be my biggest nightmare, to end up in this kind of situation.
Sure.
But I think like, okay, if you're giving me this shit, then I'm trying to use it and make something positive out of it. And that's what, gives me the the energy to being so difficult and provocative, but somebody got to do the
I
job.
love that though. I love it. You're like, yeah, you want to say I can't do a TEP? I'll just go get a PhD and prove you wrong. That is, that's some next level. That's some next level proving them wrong right there. I'll huff and puff and then just go home.
No, I mean,
you just go get another professional degree. I love it.
I could have just said, no, okay, you're right, and just given up. And then I'm like, okay, I'm living in a hospital and I'm doing this just to prove it. And we know that, okay, that's been. But it's not like I want to say, oh, I was right and you were wrong. But it actually shows that, okay, it's good for the patient. And this actually can change the trend in the country. And then I feel like, okay, I have done something good. So obviously, I don't know. You need to find something positive.
Yeah,
Otherwise, your life would be miserable.
Well, that's the flip side, right? That's when that kind of my wife sent me a meme the other day that said somebody was talking and said something like, wow, you're so successful. And the person in the meme said, thank you. I'm 100% driven by spite. Yeah. And I think that, that level of I'm going to prove you wrong. But I think that the way that that's beneficial is if you go through the process and you're wrong, then at least in my world, I have to have the humbleness to be like, okay, fine. Okay,
but then you learn through it. Of course, you can be wrong. And that's why so this is a win-win situation. No matter what you do, you learn either way. Either you learn on the way. So, but I think it's important, like, okay, what's fact and what is just personal opinion? Because it is so easy that people can have opinions and then, you go and then, so I'm more like I question things because I think it's important to question, like, but what is the fact behind it? And what is the evidence for that? And yeah.
Do you feel like we rely too heavily on expert opinion in medicine to dictate our practices?
I think it's important to have this balance, but I also think that, when you go to conferences and they're like, oh, in my hands, in my practice, it doesn't tell me anything. Because I'm like, okay, you could be very good and doing a surgery, that's fine, but you need to prove the quality. You need to follow that up. So usually when you see these, shiny stories, like look at the cases I've done and everything, and then I'm thinking, okay, but how was the follow-up? I don't know, how was that? And of course, most of the time it's been very good. You guys in US, you have done and provided so much for that. But I think it needs to be a combination. I want to see data and I want to see objective data and not, when you do research and stuff, you find out that there are so much bad stuff out there and you think like, how on earth could this be published? But then it makes you like trying to see like, okay, but what is there? If I want to change a practice or anything, I cannot just come with, this is my opinion or my experience, because sometimes everybody do that. We all have that. But then I say like, okay, but if I want other people to listen to me, then I need to provide them data. And what's the best way? Then you do a proper research with proper data, and like either it's registered or if you do an RCT or whatever, but it has to be some kind of evidence behind it and not like in my hands only, because I'm just so allergic to that expression. Like, oh, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, it's tough, like it's tough when you end up going like, people compare like laparoscopic and robotics and all those kinds of things. And then you start to go like, maybe that's true, but laparoscopically, I couldn't do that. I think there's many surgeons out there in the world that are like, well, I couldn't do that surgery laparoscopically. But I might be able to do it robotically, but I can't do that laparoscopically. So it's, for some people out there, the dichotomy is not laparoscopic versus robotic. I'm not talking about just like standard stuff, but more aggressive things. But it's not laparoscopic versus robotic. Many times the conversation's open versus robotic, and so it matters the context of some of the individual surgeon.
And I think it's important.
But I think that.
Oh, sorry. I think it's important to realize and be humble that there is not only one way to solve a problem. Yeah. And perhaps one solution is very suitable for one type of surgery, one type of healthcare, and for the other one is another thing. You have to be humble enough and see, okay, and maybe you are right, and maybe you are right. Maybe we're all right in our own way. But I think it's a bit scary when people say like, oh, this is, and they're getting a bit of like fanatic in whatever they preach. And it's like, oh, this is the thing, this is the thing. And then there is not much evidence behind it. And everybody starts doing that. And then you realize, oh, that was not a good thing. Like, for example, when the time when they use these plugs, mesh plugs, it was so good in the beginning of 20s, and everybody used it for everything. And this is what I mean. Sometimes you need to take a step back. And of course, maybe your short-term data looks very good because, you have no complication. But then within a couple of years, how is that? I think it's important to be a bit of like cautious before. Now I sound like I'm anti-technique, or it's not that, but I think it's important to just think, like question things. How is that?
Yeah.
And what is the evidence behind it? And it should be more like real life evidence, not like in specialized single surgeon centers with volumes above the numbers that we can ever achieve. So those kind of things. I think you have to question things. Yeah.
Sure. One of the as the podcast has kind of made its rounds, one person gave feedback that they wanted to hear from some of the guests about times that the hernia gods have humbled them. And so I was wanting to know if you had any specifics that come to mind. I know we all hold those stories in the depth of our mind that usually comes out in my case at like 2 a.m. when I can't go back to sleep, that one case that rolls over. But do you have any specific instances where the hernia gods have humbled you?
Of course it does every time. I think that's the thing of a part of our job. Every day you realize, first of all, we're not any gods, and everybody makes mistake. But as long as you kind of try to actively be aware of that and think like, okay, but what if I'm wrong? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you were a weak person or whatever, but I think it's important to have this kind of a humble approach when we work with people with people's life, instead of thinking of ourselves like the biggest ego on earth, the gift from God to the humankind. So it's two different edges, and you have to be somewhere in the middle and try to orientate. But of course, the more you work, the more humble you get, and the more you realize, oh, I don't know this, I need to learn this. So this is the part of like, we'll never ever learn everything, but as long as you have some kind of ambition to try to improve and be better than you were yesterday, then I'm happy with that. But we don't have to be super robotic persons with, it takes, I believe that there's all about balance. If you put all energy in one place, like becoming like the best technical surgeon, but if you don't know how to communicate with the patient, if you cannot reach to it, is that good? I would rather go to someone that actually understands rather than someone like operate, and then don't care about the rest. So, being a surgeon, our job is like maybe 20% surgery. The rest is so many other things. And that's what I try to learn and teach to our trainees, that, it's not just to operate. We're not like orthopedic people. There's a fracture, I need to fix it. It's more like, there's a patient, what do you need? And sometimes, there are different roads, and no one can say that one road is better than the others unless you have data for that. Once you have it, then you can talk about it.
Yeah.
But of course,
I think the success of a surgery many times is determined well before you get to the operating room.
No.
Just with everything else that you do leading up to it, and the decision making and the relationship you develop. So I was wanting, everybody has their opportunity to give their hernia hot take, their prediction for the future, or any kind of unpopular opinion. So this is your opportunity.
I think I've said so many unpopular opinions already, but I don't care. The thing is, before I started doing that, I just want to say, like, last comment on your thing. You said, like, what humbles me, and specific moment, it was some of female surgeons from US that I met a couple of years ago, Archana among them, and Vedra and Dr. Shuri. And they were like so awesome. And I was like, oh my God, this is, when you see that and you say like, I want to take this part of her and take this of her. And, this kind of motivation, it was so inspiring to see that. And I'm like, okay, you guys have come so far in US, and I hope that we will reach that level here in Europe as well. So, yeah. But for the hot takes that you said, well, I mean, I think the time when in maybe 10 years, I think IPOM, now I'm being very controversial, I don't think we will be using IPOMs, at least not for women. And I think we'll be having a little more different approach on how we treat female patients with hernia. I think it would be quite a lot of new stuff that will come out, because right now, as it is, most of the research are done on men. So it will be I think that will change, that will have more women's perspective on how we treat patients and also the outcomes. So I'm hopeful for that.
That's a good one, and it's a fitting hot take for our discussion. I really appreciate that you've have come on the podcast at all. I'm very, very honored to speak with you. And obviously, you've done a lot in your career and in your life that I have immense respect for. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk on the Hernia Gods podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I love this relaxed atmosphere rather than, hearing my own voice and talking about boring stuff that no one wants to interested in. So it's good. It's good to create some kind of a reflection in other people, hopefully. So they start thinking like maybe there is another truth, maybe there is another way of thinking rather than this box.
Oh, I love it. That's a fantastic way to end the episode. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of the Hernia Gods podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke, signing off. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.